One frigid winter night, a young widow, worried that her children were going to starve to death, went to get the last of her bread for what she presumed would be her last meal, and discovered some Buffardello in her cupboard, stealing her food. Sobbing, she began to scold the fairies, telling them of her child. Like little children, the Buffardello felt ashamed of what they had done, and wanting to make it right, they went and probably got bread from one of the neighbors, which they stole and gave to her. The Buffardello also blessed her cow to begin giving milk and her vegetable garden. The Buffardello, like many Italian fairies, are wild beings who had to find ways to adapt to the presence of humans by living in barns, gardens, and the trees in people's yards, although they seem to have originally preferred to live in wild nut trees. They are liminal creatures caught between their wilderness home and the new habitat which humanity has created. Many look like humans, but some are described as having animal features, such as being like a bird with a mouse's head. Wild and mischievous, they bounce around at night, jumping on sleeping people's stomachs, putting hands over people's mouths, pulling the covers off sleepers, moving objects, turning on and off lights, ripping paper, cutting people's beards, tying their hair in knots, and generally causing chaos. These fairies are a bit like children without parents and with magical powers, although some might also be vampire-like as well, draining blood from animals and the unwary. Buffardello weren't the only complicated fairies in Italy, however. A team of workers were repairing a road and were sleeping between shifts in a cave. They didn't realize a Monachicchio was in the cave already. When they fell asleep, the Monachicchio came out and grabbed the workers' noses, tickling them, threw rocks about, poured cold water on them, hid their shoes, and caused all manner of mischief. Knowing they could gain control over the Monachicchio if they got his red hat, the workers tried to catch him, but he was faster than a cat and more cunning than a fox. And try as they might, they couldn't capture him. Nor could they prevent him from bothering them as they sleep, try as they might. Finally, they sent for an engineer, who came with a shotgun. The fairy laughed at him, and the engineer shot, but the bullet ricocheted off him. The Monachicchio laughed wildly and went bounding around the cave filled with mad joy. The Monachicchio is another childish fairy who loves to play, and they will often offer gold to any child who can catch them in order to be chased in a wild and zany game. They are also an exception to the notion that fairy-like beings can't lie, for if you happen to get lucky enough to capture one's hat, they will bargain to get it back, but they never uphold their end of the bargain once they get their hat back. As you can see, although they aren't very well known in America, Italian fairies might actually be a bit wilder and more zany than their Celtic counterparts. In Naples, laws were passed in the 1600s which allowed people to leave their apartments without paying rent owed if a Munacello was haunting the house. Although, sometimes these fairies wanted to befriend the people around them. There's a story in which a student rents some apartments that are discounted because of the fairies that live within. Soon after he moves in, the fairies cause mischief, but he ignores them, no matter what they do. Eventually, this drives the fairies so crazy that they agree to make him wealthy if he'll just acknowledge them. There were a number of methods of keeping these spirits away. They could use brooms or hang juniper branches. The broom is especially interesting as a method of keeping fairies out, because even when the Roman Empire ruled Italy, brooms drove away troublesome spirits of nature. Going back a few dozen centuries, we can see the Roman origins for at least some of the ideas about fairies in Italy, although the Germans likely brought many of their own ideas about fairies with them when they conquered, and there were the Celtic ideas of fairies in the north as well. The Roman world was teeming with magical beings, and the Roman play The Pot of Gold by Plautus begins by introducing one of the house gods, the deity of a family. The fairy begins the play before telling how the father and grandfather of the family that has lived in that house for generations did not respect him properly, so he kept secret where a treasure was hidden. But the daughter who lives in the house has been kindly offering him incense, wine, flowers. Because of this, he reveals the location of the treasure to her. He, like many of the fairies, knows the locations of secret treasures and can be mischievous, and of course wants people to acknowledge him. Many of the earthly deities of the Romans were also very fairy-like. We of course know about the nymphs and the fauns, but there is also Sylvanus, a god of the forest, farms, herding, and home. Sylvanus was a musical being who would often celebrate with said nymphs and fauns, and to whom wine, milk, wheat, meat, and bacon were offered. Yet, despite being a god of the forest, he had come to represent the dreams and imaginings of the urban people. People in cities often come to long for the countryside, for the magic of the beings that lay there, for the nostalgia of beautiful and wild places. And these people in cities may have been the primary worshippers of Sylvanus in Rome. For they wanted the beautiful, and the whimsical, much as we long for the fairies to be beautiful and whimsical. Yet, like the fairies, Sylvanus was a potentially dangerous being. To protect pregnant women from him, 3 men, representing tutelary deities, were given the task of striking the threshold with an axe, a pestle, and a broom. Sylvanus, like many of the fairies, was dangerous, but he was also helpful, beloved, and whimsical. Italian fairies, like many such beings, help with farm work. They give blessings to the poor and give people coins for being good, yet they punish immorality. They could also be very dangerous, and so people had to protect those who were pregnant and watch for the ones who might drink blood. Often, these fairies would fall in love with people and would whisper in their ears and follow them about, teaching them secrets, helping them with their tasks. It is said in some stories that people in Italy learned to make cheese from the fairies. Well, that's all for now. Thank you, and toodles!